Jubilee is a popular channel here on the U of Tubes, known for their popular series Middle Ground, in which they bring people from opposing sides of a given issue to have a discussion. Another popular series from the channel is their Spectrum series, in which the people from a certain group give their responses to prompts given to them from the production crew. Today on this channel, we will be discussing 3 of their videos that I feel are ridden with that logic. First up on the cutting board, do all plus-sized people think the same, from their Spectrum series? The first prompt we will be discussing is, being plus-size is a choice. Now, if you're a member of my audience, you know I would be in the strongly agree section. The body is only able to respond to what you put in it. Calories do not enter the body without consent. Unless you are a child, someone who is not in a position to feed themselves, ending up plus-sized is something that happened to you as a result of your own actions. In response to this prompt, 3 out of 6 of the participants strongly disagreed, 2 of 6 disagreed, and the remaining 1 decided to stand on the somewhat agree. Let's see how they support their positions.
I'm only standing on this one and not strongly disagree because some people do try to be plus size. There's lots of people in the gay community that are called eaters and feeders. So people do try to be bigger, but I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a choice. So that's the only reason why I'm not strongly disagreeing.
So, what you're saying is some people choose to be plus-sized by engaging in feederism, but it's not necessarily a choice despite people choosing it.
That makes sense to me.
I lost 60 pounds in 6 months. Everyone was so happy for me. I hated myself. I hated the way I looked. I hated why I exercised and things like that. And so I made the conscious decision of my parents are not going to be supportive, or maybe they won't like it. My community, the Korean community, is going to be really disappointed that there's a fat Korean walking around the world. But it was a choice for me to say, well, I don't want to work out 8 hours a day every day and hate what I look like to be skinnier. So I'm going to let myself eat more than a quarter cup of white rice today.
Now, I include this clip for 2 reasons. One, this is taking accountability. She knows she is capable of losing the weight. She has done it. 60 pounds is no small feat. However, her understanding of what it takes to lose weight is deeply flawed. The only requirement for weight loss is a calorie deficit. And it doesn't have to be a steep deficit either. Exercise can assist in weight loss and improve cardiovascular fitness and health, but it is not necessary for weight loss, especially 8 entire hours of it. That is incredibly excessive, and it is no wonder she decided to quit. If I believed that is what it took, I would have given up too.
I disagree because I believe in society, especially in America, we have this idea that, oh yeah, all fat people ate themselves that way.
They did. Whether or not you consciously did or not is irrelevant. If you are fat, it is strictly because you ate in a caloric surplus large enough and for long enough to get that way. Thermodynamics. It spares no one.
That they just sit at home and they're lazy and they don't do anything and they ate themselves that way. But they don't take into account people who have a disease. They don't take into account people who work out and their body is just built that way. So there are all of these other factors that the average person who's judging people don't take into account, and they just look at someone and they say, oh, you're fat and you're not doing anything.
1, there is no disease that makes you fat. Not one. There are diseases that can slow your metabolism to a certain extent, but there is only one way to completely halt the metabolism of a human being. It's called death. 2, if you're exercising regularly and you are not seeing a change in weight like you expect, the issue is not that you just look that way. The problem is you are eating too much. Point blank period. Exercise cannot overcome a bad diet.
Anything about it.
But I also want to throw out there, it is possible that people have eaten themselves to that point, but then you look at why did that happen? There's trauma, there's rough coping mechanisms. There's so many different things that can lead to somebody resorting to that. and then eating themselves into this situation. Because I know that's what happened to me. I didn't choose it, but it happened.
We don't choose our trauma. If the prompt was trauma is a choice, I would be standing right beside her and nodding in agreement. Unfortunately, that wasn't the prompt. Regardless of what causes any person to overeat, it is still something they do to themselves. Trauma never made anyone fat. Overeating made 100% of fat people fat. The next prompt we will be discussing is, I want to lose weight. One person stood on the disagree line, 2 stood on the somewhat disagree line, 2 stood on the somewhat agree line, and 1 stood on the agree line.
Oh, bye. See ya.
I want to be here because this is like the work that I do, and I feel like doing this is gonna like I feel like being here, someone's gonna say something to me and be like, oh, like you aren't for body positivity, you aren't for fat activism, you aren't for liberation, but like that has nothing to do with anybody else besides me. I think like if I say this and I'm not being honest with myself and saying like, you know what, sometimes I do think about losing weight because I do, and like everyone does.
Because there's privileges when you're smaller. So it's like, it's natural to think, I want to be smaller because there's so many more options for me if I'm smaller, but I don't want to lose.
I despise when people call the benefits of not being fat privileges for 2 reasons. 1, the modern environment we live in as a result of being in a developed nation is highly obesogenic. For some, including myself, not being fat took work. I'm simply reaping the benefits of my work. Having Harvard on your resume looks fantastic if you worked your ass off in school to get it. Would you define that as a privilege? No, because that degrades the hard work put in to receive those benefits. 2, the benefits that come with not being morbidly obese are not benefits. What's really occurring is simply fat consequence. The next prompt, coincidentally, is skinny people get more privileges. You'd be shocked to learn that everyone landed on some form of disagree.
Me, since I am a dancer, it is the most annoying thing. Like, I go to auditions and I'm the only like plus size person there, and literally if you go to a concert and see an artist, you will like never see someone that looks like me dancing back up for like Chris Brown. All they care.
Interesting that you would want fat women to dance for Chris Brown. I thought you wanted to protect them. That aside, Chris Brown as a dancer is quick on his feet, and it's just the fact that skinnier people tend to not only move faster, but are generally more fluid in their movement as a consequence of them not having as much weight on their joints.
The world is created with smaller bodies in mind. Like everything we experience, when you sit in a folding chair, when you go on an airplane, when you go to the movie theater, and the unfortunate truth is our population is not that small. So just like organically speaking, smaller people have bigger privileges because the world is designed like for them.
The world we live in is not designed for smaller people. It is designed for people who aren't massive. At 240 pounds, I was a big, round boy, but I had access to everything I had access to at 150 pounds. If you start losing access to things like folding chairs, it is not because of skinny privilege. You have simply gotten very fucking large. The next video we will be discussing is, can body positive and fitness enthusiasts find middle ground? The first prompt on the cutting board is, my health is a top priority. All three people on the body positive side stepped forward, as did all 3 fitness enthusiasts. Let's see.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with lymphedema at age 3, which affects the circulation for me through my legs and feet. So health for me has always been at the top of my mind, because if I don't take care of my body, like I could have an amputated foot or leg. So it's nothing that I play around with.
Now imagine for a second, we asked this question to 3 smokers, and all 3 came forward and all 3 agreed. We would all be a bit confused, because how can health be a top priority if you are currently engaging in a lifestyle that is the antithesis of health? This is why I'm baffled by the fact that 3 obese people all stood to agree with the prompt. But maybe they truly believe they are not putting their health at risk. The next prompt on the table is, I have a regular workout routine. For this prompt, all 3 of the fitness influencers stood, but only 2 of the body positive activists stood. For this prompt, I won't be taking any clips because no one says anything juicy enough for this video. But I will point out how I am now even more baffled because the previous prompt was, my health is a top priority in my life. And all three body positive acolytes stood. How can you not regularly exercise and have health as a top priority? It does not compute. We already know obesity by itself is a risk factor for disease. But we also know that a lack of exercise can increase that risk. This 2016 Norwegian study compared instances of diabetes in the three main BMI groups according to their level of physical activity. And one thing that the authors note is that the highest instances of diabetes were found in obese people with low levels of physical activity. They were 1.3 times higher relative to obese people who had high levels of physical activity. The next prompt on the cutting board is, sometimes people use body positivity as an excuse to not take care of themselves. And I could not agree more with this prompt. 2 out of 3 of the body positive influencers agreed, as did all 3 fitness influencers. But I want to bring your attention to the one person who disagreed because her reasoning is remarkable.
Do I feel like there are people in the body positive community that say, well, I'm just happy being fat and I'm just gonna lay down and just do that? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Fat pride, hashtag fat pride was something that was going on
it's
for a little while.
Just body positivity in general has become a big buzzword that everyone just throws
Exactly.
out.
You said something at some point that
So she admits that there are people in the community who are just happy being fat and choose to lay down and do nothing about it, yet she disagreed with the prompt.
Somebody ain't doing the math right.
The final video we will be looking at is titled, Can Fat and Fit Influencers Find Common Ground? The first prompt in this video is, I promote healthy standards as an influencer. Both of the fat influencers step forward, as do all 3 of the fit influencers. Right off the bat, if you're promoting fat acceptance, you have no business agreeing with the prompt, because it is well established at this point that obesity is responsible for a litany of diseases.
For me, I don't focus on diet and weight loss as a tool for health and how I communicate that. I focus on movement and finding movement that works for you, that feels good and is sustainable in your body. Because ultimately, I think everybody would agree, movement is healthy, exercise is healthy. In the fitness world, and I myself am a yoga instructor, so I kind of straddle both sides. I think there's an overemphasis on physicality and diet and exercise.
Personally,
This sounds fine and dandy, but the reality is your weight is not separate from your health. Earlier I mentioned this 2016 study, and if you recall, I mentioned that inactive obese people have 1.3 times the occurrences of diabetes when compared to highly active obese people. But what I didn't mention was the fact that highly active obese people themselves are still 13 times more likely to have diabetes than a normal weight highly active person. This 2020 study by Zhang and colleagues found a similar pattern with cardiovascular disease. When compared to sedentary obese individuals, highly active obese individuals had 50% lower odds of cardiovascular disease, while highly active normal weight people had 78% lower odds. So yes, while exercise is very important for your body's health, it's not going to totally eliminate the risk associated with obesity.
behind being complacent.
Well, I want to say that it doesn't mean.
How does it not equal complacency? What work goes into maintaining a fat body? None. Trust me, as a former fat person, I am well aware of how easy it is to achieve that gut.
So a little bit about me is that I was a 3-sport athlete almost my entire life, went to college and played a sport. And then I decided, I've always been, a big person, and I was able to manipulate my weight because I also wrestled. So I would bulk up for football season, lose for wrestling, and rinse and repeat.
So the prompt was, I promote healthy standards as an influencer. Healthy standards as an influencer. That has nothing to do with athletic ability at all. We have to abandon this idea that athletes are just a picture of health, because they aren't. Especially at the highest level, it isn't about extending your life. It becomes about performance and what you can make your body do regardless of the toll it takes on your body. According to the CDC, NFL defensive linemen are 42% more likely to die of heart disease than the general population. Being good at a sport isn't a guarantee of health. So those were the only parts of the video I wanted to give my input, but I want to bring your attention to this part towards the end.
Really want people to stop looking at fat people and all of a sudden becoming medical professionals and telling me about high blood pressure and diabetes, because again, you're not a medical professional, right? Like let's let the fat people do the mukbangs too, you know? Like,
You are 100% correct. I am not a medical professional, and no one should be just giving fat people unsolicited health advice. But here is the issue. If you want to not listen to them because they aren't medical professionals, fine. But let's not pretend like the medical professionals are on your side, because that seems to be how you're phrasing it. With that said, I want to thank you all for your support, and I'll catch you on the flip.